Test 1, 2, 3. 1. Good evening. I call this meeting of the Bastrop Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this meeting has been duly called and that a notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. At this time, Dr. Lee, would you please come up and canvass our May 4th elections, please?
Our election was, of course, held on Saturday, May the 4th, 2019. We had 3 trustee positions up for election. A total of 1,243 votes were cast in that election. Chris Dillon received 655 votes, and Amy Ferris received 544 votes. Chris Dillon was elected for another 3-year term for BISD Trustee Place 5. Dr. Matthew Mix, who ran for Place 6, and Ashley Muchink for Place 7, both of them ran unopposed. So they will each begin new 3-year terms on the BISD Board of Trustees. So I recommend the board accept these canvass results as presented to us by the County Elections Office for the trustee election held May 4th.
I'll make a motion to approve the canvassing of the votes by Dr. Lee. Have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Our motion carries. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Yes. All right. At this time, Mr. Edwards, would you please take us through the agenda review, please?
I certainly will. Thank you very much. As you all know, we have our regular scheduled board meeting on May 21st, Tuesday at 5:30. We'll call the meeting to order. The first, go through our Pledge of Allegiance. We'll do the administration oath of office for our new board members. Judge Dugan will be doing that for us. Item F would be to reorganize the board leadership. We'll have our student speaker on integrity. We will also go through our special recognitions of our students and adults that have accomplished great things this school year. We'll move into our superintendent's report. We'll do a financial report, budget update. It'll be probably shorter than since we're doing a workshop tonight, we'll go in much more depth this evening, and then we'll see what the legislature does between now and then and provide any updates as necessary. We'll have an operations police department report. It's for report only. It's the annual activity report we present each year. We'll move into our consent agenda. And I do need to add one item to that, item G. Last month, you all considered approval of revisions to TASB policy FL local. We need to add that for a vote. Okay, and we'll have that. Was it in their packet, Nancy?
Yes.
Yes. And it's a small change. Christy, can you speak to that?
Right. It's it removes date of birth from automatically being included in directory information. And makes a change to address and grade level. So
Yeah.
it's just a discrepancy in
Our practice.
one policy versus the directory information in the student handbook.
Then we'll move into action items.
Molly.
Yes.
I have a
Molly, I'm
question
sorry.
just about, let's see, is it 3F? Lila, will you tell us a little about, on Tuesday, about the San Marcos Clinic Foundation that,
I'm sorry.
the San Marcos Clinic Foundation? Is that under,
Oh, on the,
Where are we?
that was part of the general fund budget amendment? Yes. The special ed had, well, it's actually, the special programs had applied for or had received a grant from, let me find the information, I have it, from the San Marcos Civic Association for training for early education. And so that they received that check, and so that was added to part of the budget amendment because it will be run through the general fund.
Okay.
And so
This is a grant that Jackie and her team
Yes,
received.
that's right.
Okay, yes.
and so and that's just the revenue and the expenditures that go with that.
okay.
As far as what the grant is for, again, it said early childhood development, but it's a training for I want to say 6 staff members at least. It'll go to a training for that they receive.
And it's been, yes, it's so the
Special program.
special.
Our dyslexia teachers are receiving some extended
Oh, okay.
opportunities in this grant. So they get paid for this extensive training, and then I believe there's also some
reading readiness and basic language skills is what the training's about, so.
Great. No, I'm sorry. Well, I know it's not.
Okay, then we move into action items. We're going to take the approval of the memorandum of understanding between Bastrop and Common Threads off. We haven't finalized that. We haven't received it from Common Threads.
Their higher-ups are still working through the MOU, so they just haven't sent it back to us.
So we'll take that off until they're ready. Consider approval of memorandum of understanding between ACC Articulated Credit Program. We'll vote on that. And consider approval of a resolution for governmental obligation contract between, and this is our lease program that we're going to do for the financing of the cameras, the additional cameras.
On that memorandum with ACC, did anything stand out that's changing?
No, sir. This is actually, we're pretty late in the year. They just sent us MOU for this current academic year.
Oh.
So we're bringing it, and it was just, we kept asking for it, and they were just delayed in sending all of those out to all of our Central Texas schools. So, but we do have our courses already in place, so it doesn't change anything in terms of the training or the courses that we offer kids through this opportunity with ACC.
Okay, thank you.
There was, one of the bullets said something about awarding of credit, and then they have to attend ACC within so many months.
Right.
Does that,
For articulated credit, how that works is basically it's like a credit and escrow for the students. And so once they finish high school and then attend ACC within a certain amount of time, I believe it's a 2-year period, maybe up to 14 months, then that escrow that's waiting for them, that credit that's waiting for them in escrow will actually be granted once they've, registered, matriculated as
but they have to register at ACC?
correct, at ACC. Yeah,
Okay.
This is an ACC articulated credit.
I see, okay. So that's different than the dual credit or,
Correct.
okay.
All right, are there any other questions on those action items? Okay, well, other than that, then we'll move into information, calendar of events, enrollment, and then Central Appraisal District proposed budget will be in there for information for you.
All right, at this time, we want to go into our budget workshop. Sandra Callahan, we're only looking for exciting and dynamic news this evening.
We don't need this.
I have a few new things, and hopefully, I would hope maybe by Tuesday, some more additional information. But what I wanted to go through the presentation, just kind of a summary of it, is the latest House bill and Senate bill, side-by-side kind of changes that have occurred and that I've received, and then just go through our actual budget based on current law, and then just some payroll and just expenditure information for next year, since we do have to adopt the budget in June. When I spoke to, actually, I don't know if you've heard of Omar Garcia, but he's the person who makes the state aid template. He's the guru of really, I think, state financial aid in the state of Texas. And I had emailed him this week and asked him a bunch of clarifying questions. And then I said, I have a budget workshop this week. What would you talk about? What would you say about the legislative proposals? And he said he really wouldn't say anything because it's just too unknown at this time. But I do have some slides in there, and I do have some numbers, though I wouldn't take them too seriously. But I mean, I do think what we do know is that the legislature is going to do something this year, so that's a good thing. We're not sure where it'll land, and it may not be everything we want, but I do think it'll be for the benefit of the children of the state. So we're just going to keep that thought in our mind. One thing that's changed on the budget calendar that I wanted to add is a possible budget workshop the first week of June, just because we may not know more next week, but before we adopt the budget on June 18th, if there's a lot of additional information or any additional information that might be necessary to have a budget workshop. So that's just kind of just a plan, just to have in your calendar, and I guess we'll certainly let y'all know, and Nancy can find out when the best date would be. So that's a possibility, because the budget, it'll have to be posted in the newspaper on the 8th of June and then adopted by June 18th. What I would say as far as a special session, which that I don't hear that that's going to happen, but it could, we would adopt our budget under the current law scenario, and then once the special session ended, if they propose new legislation, then we would amend our budget after that time.
So that June 4th and 5th, the reason we'd bump that up, Board, is because the following week, we're at Leadership TASB in San Antonio. We normally would have an agenda review meeting. So for y'all's calendars, that's why we may have to go a week early.
Oh, there it is.
Got it? Again, the priority goals going into the budget, like we've had safety, security, academic achievement, and broad support for relationships. May 27th is when the session ends, so we're going to hope to have some good news by then. Have to get busy, I guess, in this next week. The basic allotment, what's changed on this slide is actually the Senate put a number to theirs because they had that they were going to have an increase to it, but didn't have an amount. So the House stayed at 60/30, and the Senate has announced $5,880 as their basic allotment increase. The House Bill 3 pay raise, this hasn't changed since last month, but I just put it up there to, again, it talks about the 17% increase to the state minimum pay scale and how that will, how that is affected, how we would give those raises based on 25% of the basic allotment increase would be used for salary increases for full-time employees, and 75% given in an equal amount and 25% at the discretion of the school board. And that's for anyone other than administrators. And I do have a slide that gives some numbers on that later. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
But oh, no, I was going to say, but it really, the 25%, no, that really doesn't matter because we already are above the number they're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I do think
some teachers, if
yes.
they think they're going to get a raise.
Yes, based on that.
Yeah.
And I do think there will be a raise, and yeah, it's good. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Because what Omar told me, getting to the Senate version, this $5,000 allotment, now they're calling it an allotment. Before it was just a $5,000 increase for full-time teachers and librarians. He thinks the Senate's not going to budge on that, and so that's going to be one thing that the House and the Senate's going to have to compromise on. But he thought the Senate's not willing to compromise on that. So, but it's good. When I asked Omar about it being an allotment, he said if it's an allotment, it continues every session as long as every session includes it. So if an allotment were adopted for this session, then it would for sure be 2 years. They wouldn't have to continue, but I would hope it would, because that's a large sum of money that the districts would have to make up if that all of a sudden was there and then not. So, but I was glad to see the word allotment get put in.
How would you have to make it up?
I'm sorry?
How would you have to make it up?
Good question.
You just have,
You get it for 2 years, and then you don't get it anymore, right?
well, I guess.
It's not an allotment?
Then it just goes away, yeah, because there was many years ago, there was a $2,500 allotment for teacher pay raises, and it did stay in the legislature for probably 5, 6, 10 years, but then it was gone. I mean, the districts just had to make up the difference with their
Correct.
state aid and their tax collections.
You have to continue that same pay rate.
Yeah,
You
that same
wouldn't
level of
drop it,
funding,
yeah.
or you take it away. So imagine that in 2 years.
Yeah.
Say they didn't fund it, we can't afford it, we're dropping everybody's pay.
Yeah.
So
Is that
that's,
addressed in their teacher contracts at all?
as far as pay, yeah, it's whatever you approve every year.
Yeah, but since I've been on here, it's been, we've done 1% or 2,
You
2.5 or 3. I mean, it all depends on how much money.
Well, I mean, that's what we do, a one-year contract or that kind of thing for the teachers. I mean, it changes every year, and then this comes in.
That'll be interesting to see what the House has to compromise in order for the Senate to get that. These are a new incentive pay. Senate creates a new teacher incentive allotment, and the House creates a new educator effectiveness allotment, which weights 0.12 for campuses in high-need census tracts or in rural areas. This was new to what I've seen. So what I think it would be on the House side is if you worked in a campus that was in a high-need census tract area, maybe you would get more money, or we'd have to pay teachers more for that. And then the incentive allotment, I guess, would be based probably on testing somehow. this performance-based bonuses has been in that third grade reading outcome bonus based on the STAR performance on STAR. The House doesn't have that. Both bills do now have the increase in the state comp ed allotment based on ranges, based on these census blocks. So the Senate at first didn't have an amount, but they continued with that 0.225 to 0.275, depending on the census blocks that we're not exactly sure where all that comes from. But hopefully if they pass this, they're going to let us know how we get that information on students.
Wait a minute. So what's the difference between this one and the one before that you said that the House had the incentive, and I mean the Senate had the incentive, and the House had a.
The House had this had the weights. The Senate had it in there, but they didn't have any weights. So now they've agreed to the House's weights. But the difference is this: is the Senate's version is based on block groups, and the House version is based on just blocks. Again, I haven't yet to understand what these census blocks are, but I'm assuming wherever you live in a certain area, there's going to be have a number or a block number, and it's going to get uploaded into the student system, and that's how and then there'll be a weight with that when we run the ADA report.
But that's probably the same one that we just saw that
Yes,
the House had. It's not like there's an additional two.
No, it's just the Senate's has
It's just this is
gone on with the
explaining
same
that.
amounts. Yeah. This was new on the Senate side to repeal the spending requirements for state comp ed, bilingual, and CTE, career and tech. Right now, we get an allotment for all of those areas, and right now, the state requires it, of the state comp ed allotment, 52% has to be spent on direct costs, bilingual, and CTE, 58%. The Senate, for some reason, thinks they want to repeal that, so what that would mean is you get the money, but they're not going to matter how you spend it. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure what that even means. But this House still has that in it. I mean, I know I would think with our district, and most districts would continue that same spending. I mean, you've got to spend that money on those students. So I don't know if there'd be another mechanism to track that on the Senate side, but it just repeals it. So when it says repeals the existing allotments, maybe they have another idea of what it would be, but there's nothing listed as far as what that might be. And then also the Senate adopted amendments to that requires the teacher incentive allotment and new state comp ed allotment to be spent by campuses generating the funding. So maybe that's what it means. The campuses, of course, that have more at-risk students or state comp ed is based on how many kids eat free and reduced lunch, but then it has to be spent on at-risk students. So I'm not sure if that's what their new mechanism is or not. Might be, which would still make sense. We do that anyways in theory because we base it on the students and the need of the students at each campus anyways. The bilingual funding, that hasn't changed. The Senate did include the same weights as the House now because they had it, but they didn't have amounts before. Gifted and talented, the Senate actually restored the GT allotment. The House hasn't. The high school allotment has been repealed still in both. Special ed, the Senate put the same amount as the House. And then on career and tech, the Senate doesn't expand the grade levels, and the House does still to grade 6. The dyslexia allotment, you can see the Senate gave a little more weight to that than the House. And then there is the school safety allotment that the House had. I didn't see anything that's changed or that the Senate made any change as far as that. The pre-K, both bills now create the new early reading allotment. So this is basically, we've talked about how if we're going to require pre-K full day, this is how we're going to pay for it. Both bills do provide waivers for districts if they don't have the space to be able to provide that. And of course, the Senate did have in theirs last time that for children of public school educators, they could go to pre-K for free, regardless of their status, and I guess if it's all full-day pre-K for everyone. And then this was interesting. The Senate adopted an amendment that you would partner with current daycare providers for leasing pre-K facilities, and I'm assuming that there's a big lobby in the daycare industry in large areas. I've heard in Dallas where this free full-day pre-K could certainly hurt their business when those students are not going to be coming half a day anymore to their daycare. So I think that's probably why the Senate put this provision in, but it's not in the House.
Any particular training or certification for the state?
Well, it just says to lease the facilities, so I'm not sure. It doesn't talk about the staff, because the staff is what costs. So if they think we would lease their facility and put our staff in it, is what it would sound like to me. A couple of new allotments, creates a new allotment related to accelerated campus excellent plans, a new fast growth school district allotment, and a dropout recovery school allotment. Those are new, and the first I heard about those when I got this update like Friday of last week. No amounts put to it. And then this slide is talking about the pennies, the golden pennies and copper pennies, with the reduction in the tax rate. Of course, our golden pennies are our 4 pennies, and districts that have, for instance, if you had a $1.17 tax rate, your first 6 pennies are golden, and then the pennies over 6 are copper. We don't have copper pennies, of course, since we only have a 4 cent above the compressed rate. But the Senate, so in theory, what I think this means is, on the House side, because we'll have to drop our tax rate back to 96 cents, then 8 pennies, all of those 8 pennies could be golden for us, which would be good, because that gives us an extra allotment. And the Senate would only allow for 6 pennies. But the next slide talks a little more about the tax rate reduction. So in that golden pennies, and that tells you what the weights would be. Copper pennies, again, we don't get. Senate is, again, still has to go with current year values, and the House using the prior year values still. And I guess the understanding is that if the Senate wants to go to current year values, that's going to cost the legislator a lot more money, because the state aid will be reduced, especially for certain fast growth districts. On the property tax relief, this one is scary to me. The compression percentage is 90 cents. So 90%, 90 cents for us under the Senate, and there's a 2.5% cap. And under the House, the compression rate's 96%, so 96 cents. So when I spoke to Omar about this, because this is one I am concerned about, until we can get our truth in taxation software that actually calculates all of these percentages about your rollback rate, and of course they can't do that until the legislature finalizes that. Because of course, our property values are a lot higher than 2.5%, then that would mean that 90 cent tax rate could even be lower, because it would not allow you to go above that 2.5% cap. So maybe this is what the House is going to compromise, the Senate's going to compromise on for the House versus the $5,000 pay raise. I don't know, but. I don't know what will happen on that. That's an interesting to me, and we'll just see how that works. And the M&O tax rate cap is still going to be, I guess, $1.17. The maximum would be your compressed rate plus 17 cents. So that's for districts that have had a TRE.
Is the state making up, if they do compress the tax rate, are they making up the difference?
I don't know how they couldn't, but it doesn't seem to me that they would. But they would. I don't know. That's a good question. I've got to get more information on that.
So would this make a future swap attractive or less attractive?
Well, swaps are what this last thing I got said they're going to be out. You won't be able to do them anymore. The reason I say I don't know that it would make it up, because since your state aid is based on your prior year CPTD values, this would be actually what you're collecting your taxes on. That's value, not the state aid value. So, yeah, the tax swap said it pretty much says it would make it illegal in the Senate side. So that's pretty much just on the legislative stuff. If y'all have any questions on that, the next part is kind of just our budget, some scenarios we put together, some costs that we wanted to show you, and things in consideration, so that when you bring a budget that's closer to being adopted, you'll have some ideas of just the numbers. And this presentation will be posted on the website. And I plan to have by Tuesday night some spreadsheets that have more of the detail information that don't usually fit on the slide very well, and I'll show you that. But our budget assumptions for 1920 are a little different than what I showed you last month. We're estimating an enrollment of 11,189, and then ADA at 10,379. That's a little bit lower than we had. That's about a 2% increase of this year, but our ADA, of course, was lower this year than we anticipated because our enrollment was lower this year than we anticipated. And there's the two values for state aid calculation and property value for tax revenue calculation. This property value summary, this is something that the comptroller sent some information on. This is really something to show kind of the lag in property values. So the top row is the property values we use for collecting taxes. That's what the appraisal districts send us for the current year, and that's what we collect our taxes on. The second row is, of course, our tax rate. And then local collections, now that's based on if you collect 100% of your taxes. But just for the calculation, that shows what the revenue would be. Now, we collect of local revenues, of local taxes each year, current, about 95%. But we're always usually about 100% with delinquent taxes. But this only talks about the current taxes. And then the property values used for the state calculation, you can see the difference in how that can vary. And really our property values are kind of, as you know, our property values have rose in the district, and so our numbers aren't as far off as some districts probably are, as far as if you have huge property value growth. And we have had a significant one this year again, but I think I mentioned last time when they send those certified values, they tell you this roll will be reduced significantly because of people filing protests, and they are filing lots of protests. So have to be very conservative in what that real number you're going to base your tax revenue on. The WADA is your weighted average daily attendance, and that's for all of your allotments that we talk about, plus your basic allotment, and that's a number that you get when you add all those allotments up. And then the wealth per ADA, that's the number, of course, that tells whether you're a Chapter 41 district. We're a long way off from that. And then
that number, do you know?
525, I think is the last time I heard it, 525,000, so yeah. And then, of course, just state aid from the prior years. And the first rating actually requires to show that, which we talk about the lag in property values all the time, but this was a good format that they suggested to use.
Does this put us pretty close to a $100 million budget next year?
Well, it will depend on what the legislature gives us. It could definitely put us over $100 million for sure. And this, just the property value history, it's just interesting to see this, how much our property values have increased, how that line has gotten so
Steep.
Steep, yes.
Steep.
Since 2012. This is a general fund budget summary, and this is what you usually see as the big page that has all the different functions, but I wanted to put it in a format where you can see. So let me just explain what this is. So 18-19 is amended. As you know, in 18-19, we adopted a break-even budget. Over the course of the year, we had a number of maintenance, emergency, air conditioners, wastewater system issues that we've had to contend with. And so we've amended the budget. There's an amendment for this month. And I do show a small deficiency, but I can tell you we'll have a break-even budget, or we'll put money in fund balance this year based on our, again, we'll get near final ADA, so that's something we have to look at. So we won't have a deficiency this year. Current law 1920. So what this is the revenues based on current law, and the expenditures are 18-19 expenditures with those one-time costs out. So what I wanted to show on this slide is if we had the same exact thing this year, except take out those one-time air conditioner costs, how much money we would have under current law to spend. So right at 1.1 million. Okay, so that's not a lot of money when you think about it. So just in going through now, the next few slides talk about just things that we have to do, payroll and increase, salary increase scenarios, just so you'll get an idea.
And you didn't increase the expected student. That's if this.
That does have the revenue does have an increase in student enrollment at the ADA of about 2%.
That 11,000 or
the 10,379. Yeah.
Okay.
So payroll costs that we've been looking at, and I think we talked about this last month, that we, right now, it looks like we would need 10 teaching positions for growth, and that would just be to meet our 22-to-1 and meet all of our ratios. And we, of course, have been talking about having 2 new police officers in the budget. So right now, that's what we have as far as additional payroll costs.
What about vehicles? Is that?
Yeah, I have that, I have that on another slide, yep. So then just payroll costs as far as some budget considerations in if the House bill were to pass and we were to consider giving different percentage of raises, what that would cost. And the employer contribution is something we haven't gone up on in many, many years. And so what our goal would hopefully be is that each person could have at least the high deductible plan at no cost. And so, because employees have been having to pay a cost each year. So it would increase, if we increased everyone's in contribution $55 per month per person, that would cost us about $643,000. And then as you can see, we just did scenarios of salary increases. This would be straight across the board salary increases for all staff and just what that would cost, and thinking about if we do get additional funds, what it looks like, how much it is. So when we bring a recommendation back, we'll of course have this number again, but just to show you what those dollar amounts are. Because I do think teachers they're expecting, not teachers, everybody's expecting raises. As you saw on the news last night, Austin ISD, now those teachers are asking for a 10% raise, and I'm not sure how they could do it. But anyway, so that's just kind of gives some costs. Some other budget considerations, current contracts we have, transportation, a CPI, and to give those bus drivers, the beginning bus drivers, a small raise so they can get bus drivers to get the students here, $254,000 to that contract, additional routes, $88,000. Our maintenance CPI increase is $113,000, and then our appraisal district cost, $44,000. That's just to appraise our taxes. So that right there is $455,000. So those are kind of what I would call non-negotiables, really.
So back to those salaries, those percentages, does that take out the money that we'd get from the state for the teachers?
No, this isn't based on the $5,000. No. That would be based on the House bill, just the basic allotment increase. Other HVACs, maintenance repairs, HVACs and wastewaters, that we have gotten some information from our maintenance contractor, and that's probably, I can tell you that's a small number, but that's just some numbers they've given us. They're going to give us updated numbers, because I do think that would be small, as you know what those expenses cost. The safety and security vehicles for $70,000, and 2 portable buildings are really needed at Cedar Creek Middle School for their growth, and of course the portable setup that would go along with that. So this is.
Setup's more than a portal? Setup's more than a portal?
You have to pay to get all the.
So it's just a shell, and then they.
Well, no, the portable comes, but you have to get the property ready. You have to get electricity, water. You have to get the technology to them, and get the It's
just a lease.
We might dedicate them to
It's expensive, but it's very expensive to move an existing portable too, as far as the setup. Almost more cost more. So on the Senate bill, the teacher and librarian raise, that would cost the district about $3.7 million, period. So if there's an allotment that would take that would cover that, then that would be great. So the House bill, though, it talks about this basic allotment estimated increase. So the basic allotment increase in the House is about $5 million. 25% of that, which they're saying you would have to give as raises, is $1.2 million. And then 75% of that 25 is $900. That's really not a lot of money to give raises. And then the notion of an increase for all non-administrative staff, I just estimated that out based on our number of staff, would be like $836. I hear different numbers talked about, $1,800, $1,700. I don't know where those numbers are really coming from. That may be from the basic allotment, just the basic allotment increase. But again, if districts already pay above that, I don't know how that's all going to work into the legislative
Sandra, so just understanding, if this passes, they're going to help us fund part of the request.
Yes, I think in both bills,
They're going to help us fund part of the request. Whatever we decide otherwise, obviously, is on us.
It's above and beyond.
but we won't know until next week.
Maybe not next week, but by June 18th, hopefully.
I just got, a lot of people talking. And from a board's point of view, you're kind of wondering, okay, you're going to pass this, whose tab is it going to be on? But it looks like they're going to help.
Definitely, they're going to help because whether it's the Senate bill giving an
100%
allotment
or whether it's,
or the House bill, and let me see if the next slide
Think they
actually.
push this special session?
They could, but it's not what I'm hearing.
They've been working. They've been together, 2 weeks already? And they still have 2 more. I would anticipate they're going to get it done because they really got a good start.
Unless they want it to go.
Unless they want, yeah.
And again,
somebody
none of us can
solves
anticipate that.
everything.
Correct.
But so here's really the increased estimates for the House bill version and the Senate version. And this is not anything that's set in stone, but this is just estimates that for the House bill, we have a template, and for the Senate bill, we had a Moat Casey run. But so really, we'd get about $10 million more under the House bill. That's the basic allotment, but that includes all your special funding, comp ed, bilingual, all of those increases. And then the Senate bill is about a $8.6 million increase overall, but in that 8.6, that 5,000 raise is included. So really, you would have less money to work with in the Senate bill after you take the raises out, but
And
at
that
least
dollar
it's more money.
amount was 3 point what?
3.7.
7.
So you would have some money left over, but again, some money is going to be spoken for in these allotments that has to be spent in. And also we want to talk about our debt service and food service budget because the board also adopts those. Just looking at 18-19, of course, we did a bond redemption last year and paid off $2.2 million in bonds early. And so we'll still have an excess in our debt service budget this year. And for next year, again, what I'd point out is local revenue, again, that's based on the preliminary values. Because of our values, they've grown to the amount they have, we're not eligible for state aid on our debt service, and this is the first time that that's happened. But when our bond advisor, our financial advisor, does any estimates for us for future bond talks, he never considers state aid because knowing our values were going up. So we still have enough money to pay our bonds, and we would definitely could pay off some bonds early again this year, which would be recommended.
So Sandra, what's, just right now, without the Senate bill helping or either one house, what is our bonding capacity roughly for no pennies?
For no pennies?
90 million, 95 million?
110 the last time I talked to our financial advisor.
We could run a bond for 110 million
No increase.
today with no increase in pennies.
Right.
But that's not you wouldn't do any kind of swap because that won't be able to do.
Well, I don't know that that's going to pass in the legislature or not.
But that's planning that without having to do a swap.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
That just got in the bill from what I had seen, that swap, making that illegal, basically. And then our food service budget, as last year, there's an amendment in our packet this month as well. As you know, we started breakfast in the classroom in the CEP, so our budget, we did increase on our federal reimbursements quite a bit. And of course, with the increase in participation, that increased the cost. But we should definitely put some money into food service fund balance this year, which is great because when you have a new company, it takes takes some time to get things in order. You have to buy some new things. So we've had break-evens, but it's going to be good to put a little extra in food service budget. And then for 1920, again, we'll have a basically break-even or put a little extra in as well. Food service is limited as far as you can only have 3 months of operating expense in your fund balance, but we're well below that. Also, just like to show this federal program slide. This is our planning amounts for next year. That's just current grants we know. I know we're always looking for additional grants, so just to show extra money or additional money the district does get that's outside of the budget that's adopted. So just so you can see those amounts. And again, that's planning amounts, so any carry forward we would have from this year will be added to that once the 18-19 is over. And then again, just to show our fund balance history, I haven't changed anything on that, but we do have a goal to add to fund balance in the next 3 months and have 3 months of operating expense. Certainly increase our ADA. That's important. We've got to keep working on that. And then updating our facilities assessment and deferred maintenance. Again, that is an area we have to really focus on, and I think we are. Right now, again, we're just trying to take care of things that are emergencies, but I think we're getting a plan together that's going to.
Hey, Senator, I think about this now. This is just a joint question here. Y'all have all been in different areas in our district, but to increase that ADA and with growing students, do you think the staff should have and get it done? I mean, because we're talking about adding positions or not adding positions. I mean, is it either procedural changes that need to be done to increase ADA? I'm sure we're not perfect, but do we have enough personnel to be making the calls, sending the letters, doing the home visits?
I mean, as far as I don't know of a lot of other districts and what they have, but I do know other districts have more truancy officers than we do. Certainly, we could get that information together, but.
I'm just curious, because we can say we want to do it, and it sounds good, and we can push it down.
Yeah, but we know 1% increase can give us $600,000 more in funding. So.
Exactly, it costs you, you know, $120,000 in payroll. So if you get two more, I'm just curious. So I know it's something we've always been talking about for years, but the growth hasn't stopped, and the demand seems to be increasing, and the laws seem to be
definitely
with less teeth in them.
Yes.
Right. But generally speaking, the truancy officers go after the most extreme offenders that just don't bring their kids to school consecutive days. ADA is accomplished every day by teachers and principals and office people calling, hey, we miss your child, why aren't they here today? So I think truancy officers could help, but it's creating a let's go to school culture.
That, or even, you know, and it could be internal too. If it's, you know, it's somebody supposed to be making calls but doing a dual job and getting drugged somewhere else and not be able to get those calls done. And so, and I know automation helps because, you know, I get a few texts and phone messages. Or even on, you know, your child didn't show to class today or something, you know, so I know those things are taking place. I'm just curious.
What about the transportation too? Because you talked about doing that for one of the schools.
As far as adding
busing.
transportation.
That started, didn't it?
Yes, we built it in.
So that should help that number.
It should some but that's 80 kids in the population of, you know.
Yeah.
And it fluctuates, so I think that helps, but every little thing helps.
I'm just thinking about the percentage, because that's the lowest percentage, but it's only 80 kids. So.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it tags back to their schools. Then you have kids, you know, that are sick, you have kids that are missing, and so it adds up quick.
Are there incentives for the kids to come to school?
Yeah, good grades.
I mean, is there anything else we can do?
Does Mina still have a dance party?
Attendances like dance.
Attendance,
They do
yes.
have several.
Yes, there's all, especially at the elementary.
Right.
There's a lot of, and as you go up, there's a lot of incentives, parties.
Right.
I know Mina has
Friday.
a party on Fridays.
There you go.
They
Those
get to
kinds of
dance
things,
in the
but
halls and stuff.
But it's the complexity of the home life is
Right.
is one of the biggest things.
Right.
But there is something, Panay, y'all are so creative over there in human resources. I haven't looked, I mean, what is our teacher attendance? Is it improving? Because I think that's definitely a
contributes.
direct reflection.
So I
If
do
those
a-
children know that teacher is going to be there every day and that consistency is going to be there and they know what they're going to do, you know, there's more of a.
So I do a presentation at every principal meeting,
bet you-
and it's attendance for the teachers. And it's by campus, and then I show like the high schools, and then I'll show middle, intermediate, and elementary. And so I have incentives for them. We provide cookies and snacks for the top schools every month to show some support. Thank you for coming. Because the flip side of that is not only are we losing instruction, but we're paying for a substitute, which is money. And
So is the paraprofessional in that slide with you as well as the APs? Have those for
not
those
the
principals?
APs, not the APs. It's teachers.
Classroom
Require
teachers.
substitutes. I look at the ones that require
But even
substitutes.
someone in the office who's supposed to be making calls, you know, or doing that job, I mean, it takes everybody.
Yes, it does.
It's you know.
Yeah, and I think it's it must be just a culture that has been established that sick days are teachers' vacation days. So I think that, I mean, that just kind of shocked me. I know one of the substitutes, and she says, well, they have so many days off a year, and so that's why I sub a lot. And I'm just, I didn't know that. I really didn't. So I don't know. I mean, is that
10 of
an
them.
incorrect assumption of
They get
on my
5
part?
state days and 5 local days.
Get 10 days a year.
But are they vacation, are they
No.
days to take for
No.
anything, or are they, but
No.
that's your sick days as well?
So your personal days could be like, if there's a funeral in the family, or a doctor's appointment would be for sick, if you have a sick child, a sick parent. But the personal days are for personal business. We like to think it's like insurance, so it's there. It's not, you take your 5, because like for me, when I had surgery, I had a lot saved up, so I didn't get docked in pay. And so that's the goal. Save them for a situation that you need. Don't just take them every year as vacation days. Some people have that mindset, though.
I know.
That,
We talk a lot about that.
So anyhow,
A lot.
that's just
Yeah.
something
But
else.
then you gotta
just
save it,
that
and then you-
culture, just to,
So we try to do some bonus incentives for our teachers to
Creating your budget for it's very hard.
So I guess there's 720 or so teachers in the district. And is there an average that are missing in action on a daily basis?
So the way I do the incentive is I look at first semester, because second semester is harder, and so we do a comparison on, are you doing better than last semester? Are you doing better than last month? I look at a couple of different ways, and it's seasonal. Around Christmas time, people want to go, I mean, we gave them 3.5 weeks, they still wanted more. So it just depends. And we see a lot more in the spring.
I went to an awards ceremony for another school recently because my sister's retiring, so it was her school. And they actually, one of their presentation, or what they got was a perfect attendance for the staff. And I thought to myself, well, and it was probably 10 people, and Rockdale's a very small school district, but I thought to myself, wonder how many we'd have. It included bus drivers and custodians and everything, so it was good to see that was out there.
You're creative, Renee. We got faith in you.
I wanted to give a car.
Over to donate more.
Run it past Barry.
Get your name in a,
Well, and that's the thing, put your name in, and
A
every
drawing.
month that you have perfect attendance, you get another ticket. And then by the end of the year, you could have 10 tickets, and then we gave out something
see, we knew you'd think of it.
Yeah.
something substantial that was donated. Donated, yes. And that's all I have for tonight, unless there's any other questions.
I have one question, or two. You said, we talked about the fund balance, 3 months of operating. What's that 3 months of operating right now come out to?
For us would be about 22 million, and we're right at 17 million right now. So
Okay.
trying to edge up there.
And then the other one was, we said 10 new teachers. And I know in the past we've seen that number where kids, how many students, are in a classroom compared to the state average, what's required and that sort of thing. Is that number going to be made up with the population increase? The 10's enough?
Yes, the way, as we calculated today, yes.
Okay.
So we look at our projections, Panay, we all get together, we project them out, we go for that number of teachers.
And how long ago, because those projections come from a demographer, right?
And we do
internal.
our own.
We do our own.
Oh, we do
separate,
our own.
Independent.
And we look at the demographers.
And the good news is, we're very close this year in particular.
But also to say that, and I think one slide or one form we'll have in our packet for sure by June is that staffing by campus. And so that 10 new means some campuses lost staff, some got staff. So it's that's a watch. That's really by looking at every campus and seeing what they need. Some, depending grades move to, fourth graders go to intermediate, they're big classes, then the elementary may not need as many. So it's an overall look at the whole district.
And that was my last question is redrawing the lines, would that help take some pressure off some of the schools and save us some money? Or is it time for that yet?
It's probably not time for that yet, because you still have the same number of kids and you're going to shift them. So logically, some staff would have to go with them. And one of the things we're talking about Cedar Creek Middle School, switching that line.
Yeah, because you just 2 portables just for that one school.
but we have a very large class moving through. If you'll remember, we put a portable at intermediate. Now that group's moving through.
Cedar Creek Middle School was really over capacity for many, many years before we even put 2 portables on there. So I'm not sure if teachers were, what do we call it?
They're not floating yet.
Floating around, yeah, floating,
Correct, Panay? We don't have teachers floating.
We don't have floating teachers at this time.
yeah, at this time, that's right. But
But like Jim might have some next year because he's getting several new teachers and 2 portables isn't going to cut it. So you look at the teachers that possibly maybe an athletic coach who's got periods in the gym or out on the field, so he's only in the classroom for 4 periods, he would be the better teacher to float than someone that's in a classroom for 6 hours. Obviously, your science teacher that does labs, they can't really flow beakers down the hall and chemicals and things like that. So you just have to make wise decisions, but there's a possibility that Jim will have some floating teachers this year.
And at the elementary level, really, all the schools are full except for Red Rock, and they just don't have the growth. And Lost Pines has a little room too, but yeah.
So Sandra, are you able to get our 3 months of fund balance to where it needs to be before you retire?
I think so, yes.
That's on tape. That's about a
We're gonna have
5-year
it- we're gonna-
process.
And I'll even buy the rocking
At
chair.
least
so
5
keep that
years.
out of them numbers.
We'll have a few
At least 5 years, Dr. Lee.
At least 5 years.
Say, wait,
She'll get out.
Mark it.
She'll figure it out. She can
All right, thank you.
do that.
Thank you. Appreciate
Well,
it.
you know what's coming if she drops 5 in this year.
We have extra money all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Sandra. Well done.
Thank you.
Not giving any raises.
All right. Panay has done an excellent job. That we do not have to have a closed session tonight. So thank you for Panay and Barry for taking care of business.
Diana.
Diana, all
Panay
right.
and Diana.
All right. Is there anything else on the agenda that I skipped or we need to discuss, Mr. Edler?
No, sir. That's it.
All right, anything else from the board that they would like to discuss? Thanks, thank you for everybody's flexibility here tonight, so we didn't have to have 2 meetings this week, and we'll get in here next Tuesday night. So good to see everybody. Any objections to adjourning this meeting? There are none. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.